Back in September, I was at the Mizzou-Kansas State game. As many of you guys know, I'm a big Missouri Tigers fan, and I was there to watch Mizzou knock off Kansas State by way of a crazy field goal. While that probably was the craziest moment of the game, in my opinion, the best player on the field that day was actually a tight end by the name of Ben Sinnott. I actually remember texting one of my other YouTube buddies who's a Kansas State fan and asked him who the heck this guy was. Every time the ball went his way, he caught it, he was always getting open, he made terrific blocks, and he looked like a future NFL tight end. At the time, he was projected to go in the 7th round or to go undrafted, but flash forward a few months later, he became one of the best tight ends in school history, absolutely went insane at the NFL Combine, and now has been taken in the 2nd round by the Washington Commanders. I guess my gut instinct was right back in September, and in today's video, I want to introduce you to Ben Sinnott. At one point, he was a 0-star recruit who had to walk onto Kansas State. He was buried on the depth chart as a fullback and is now an NFL tight end in the 2nd round. It's a pretty crazy story, and today I'm going to tell you about it. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of the NFL or just college football in general, be sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know what prospect or rookie I should cover next. I love these type of videos. Also, don't forget to leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Ben Sinnott. In order to understand how Ben Sinnott got to this point, we first need to go back in time. He was from Waterloo, Iowa, and his high school coach Brad Schmidt has told the story of Ben Sinnott so many times he just laughs thinking about it. He did say that in 2019 it would have been a stretch for him to envision Sinnott playing in the NFL, but at the same time he knew he had a special player. But let's first go back to Waterloo, Iowa. Early on, Ben actually had one sport that he loved, and it was hockey. He said, quote, "Hockey was my first love just when I started when I was 3 years old." He ended up playing in a club league all throughout high school, but he did say in time football became his favorite. While golf, tennis, and track allowed Sinnott to showcase his athletic ability, football offered the same reason he fell in love with hockey. He said, quote, "I did not want to play football until I could hit. I wasn't playing flag football or anything, and this instinct probably came from playing hockey. I think it was 3rd or 4th grade, and it was really fun, and I loved it right when I picked it up. That's when he started playing football." Sinnott was a big-time athlete and would eventually arrive in high school as a future star. He did a little bit of everything for Columbus Catholic High School, which coincidentally is the former alma mater of Kansas State head coach Chris Kleiman. In addition to football, he would letter in baseball, golf, track, and tennis. He literally did everything. On the football field, he'd end up being a tight end at Kansas State, but at Columbus, he was a wide receiver. He said, quote, "I didn't do a ton of blocking in high school. I was always a bigger kid, so I would just do it every once in a while, but I pretty much was just a big receiver in high school." There was one moment in particular when Coach Schmidt knew that Ben was special. This followed their season-opening 35-6 win, and he said in that game, Sinnott caught 3 touchdown passes, but it was the one-handed interception with a 72-yard return for a touchdown that really made him know that Ben had a future. He said, quote, after the game, "I'm telling you right now, Sinnott is the best player in the state. Just watch the way he plays, he's a stud. That interception changed the game for us and my perception." As a senior, Sinnott was pretty special. He ended up starring on the football field and caught 40 passes for 610 yards and 14 touchdowns. He also ran the ball 21 times for 169 yards and had 4 more scores there. On top of that, he ended up playing on defense, where he recorded 42.5 tackles, 11 of which were TFLs. While he was great and one of the best hockey players in the state, he would have to address the elephant in the room: his future. Even when Sinnott realized hockey wasn't his ticket to college success, football recruiters weren't exactly breaking down his door either. But he was still a good, respectable player. His high school coach said, quote, "I did know he was in a class of his own. He was as good of a high school football player as I've ever seen, and if we needed 5 yards to get a first down, he got it. If we needed a stop on 3rd and short, he got it. When we needed something to happen, he'd go do it." While he was a great player in high school, where was he going to go for college? Well, he had one Division I offer coming out of high school, and that was from FCS South Dakota. He actually decided to commit there and was all set to go across the country to South Dakota, but then it all fell apart. While it was enticing to go there, it was more lucrative for him to go play for Chris Kleiman. As I said, he was an alum of his same high school, and through those connections and seeing potential that other recruiters may have missed, Chris Kleiman offered him an opportunity to walk on at Kansas State instead of getting his school paid for at the FCS level. Kleiman said, quote, "I went to school with his dad, and I've known him for a long time. I saw a really good athlete that nobody was really recruiting, and he had some FCS interest, so we brought him down and talked to him and said, hey, we've got an opportunity for you to walk on. This would end up being challenging for Ben, and he would really have to bet on himself. Kleiman said, quote, it wasn't easy for him. He was a walk-on that came in here and earned an opportunity. He was undersized and knew he had to change everything in the weight room and everything with his eating habits just to have a chance. He bought into everything and said that he wanted to play and that he wanted to be a difference maker. Sinnott was ready to go over to Manhattan, Kansas, but how was the zero-star recruit from Waterloo, Iowa going to do there? Well, let's take a look. Kansas State head coach Chris Kleiman was the first to admit that he took a flyer on Ben Sinnott. He was just a skinny walk-on, and he had no idea what he was getting. It was definitely interesting. He was listed as a fullback when he first got to Manhattan, and sometimes that position group is interchangeable with the tight end spot in the Wildcats offense they run. He didn't end up doing anything in 2020, and then as a redshirt freshman in 2021, he would step on the field a little bit. He ended up having 3 carries for 12 yards and also had his first career touchdown. That went alongside 2 catches for 15 yards, and he also helped them beat LSU in the bowl game. Going into 2022, Sinnott would have much more of a role. In Week 1 against South Dakota, he caught 2 passes, and then he'd have his breakout performance in Week 4 against number 6 Oklahoma. You could say this was Ben Sinnott's coming out party, as in that game he had 4 catches for 80 yards. This is when he started to get comfortable in the system, and now that Colin Klein was the full-time offensive coordinator, he fully became a tight end, and he took full advantage of it. His 2 years in the weight room also finally came through for him, as he bulked up to 240 plus pounds and got much quicker and more agile. As the 2022 season progressed, he became one of the favorite targets of both quarterbacks Adrian Martinez and Will Howard. When Martinez went down with an injury, he started to become more of a factor. A couple weeks later, he helped them beat number 9 Oklahoma State 48-0, had 3 catches and a loss to number 24 Texas, and then had his real breakout performance. On the road against Baylor, they would knock off the Bears 31-3, and Sinnott caught 7 passes for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. He followed that up with another touchdown on the road against West Virginia, and then he would help them beat Kansas. K-State had a 10-2 regular season, and then he scored a touchdown in their Big 12 championship win over number 3 TCU. They'd end up making the Sugar Bowl, and against number 5 Bama, Sinnott caught 3 passes and finished the year with 31 receptions for 447 yards and 4 touchdowns. Sinnott was low-key becoming a bigger name, and going into 2023, Will Howard was going to be the full-time starter, and he was now one of the go-to options on the team. In Week 1 against SEMO, Sinnott would have a breakout performance, catching 5 passes for 100 yards. After that, he'd have a catch against Troy, and then he'd have a huge game against Mizzou. This was the game that I was personally at, and against the Tigers, Sinnott caught 5 passes for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. He made a couple of very athletic plays, was a tremendous blocker, and just seemingly dominated a really good defense. Mizzou ended up winning by way of that crazy game-winning field goal, and while Kansas State lost, they still had a good season. After that, he had 5 catches and a win over UCF, had a touchdown and a loss to Oklahoma State, and then had 6 catches against Texas Tech. After that, they would blank Houston, losing overtime to Texas. Then he'd have a touchdown in both their win over Baylor and their road victory over number 25 Kansas. So far, so good for Sinnott, and he would end up finishing his career on a high note. He had a career-high 10 catches for 136 yards and a touchdown, and this would come in a close loss to Iowa State. Sinnott had quickly become one of the better tight ends in the country, finishing with 49 catches for 676 yards and 6 total touchdowns. He ended up playing in 3 total seasons for K-State while being there 4 years, and caught 80 passes for 1,123 yards and 10 touchdowns. He was a first-team All-Big 12 selection both seasons, each and every year, and went down in history for K-State in terms of tight ends. He tied for the 3rd most in receiving touchdowns, 3rd in receptions, and 4th in receiving yards. One can only wonder how much better he would have been if he came back for one more season, but he decided to declare for the NFL draft, and he would probably be taken day 2 or day 3. He was just your average tight end prospect, but then teams started to watch his film and look at how athletic he was. In terms of his raw athletic score, his numbers were off the chart. He became the 29th best tight end since 1987 and tested 29th out of 1,116 tight ends. That, combined with his production and his potential, made him start to fly up draft boards. It's crazy though, because this guy was a walk-on. He said, quote, "I walked on here and it just means a lot knowing how much work, time, and effort and sweat went into this. It's all coming together and it definitely means a lot for me." According to NFL Mock Database, Sinnott was projected a third-round pick and was the 85th best prospect. Sometimes there are players that go much higher than expected, and this year Sinnott was one of them. Some are calling him one of the crazier picks, but he was taken in the second round with the 53rd overall selection by the Washington Commanders. Washington has had trouble developing tight ends, and many are hoping that he can change their fortune. In terms of his thoughts on getting drafted by Washington, he said, quote, "I'm so excited. This is an organization that I've really been hoping to get taken by and couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity." He wanted to be a Commander because of his conversations with the staff and how him and the tight ends coach clicked. They seem to develop a good plan and a great way to utilize Ben's talents. He also is excited for new OC Cliff Kingsbury and head coach Dan Quinn. In terms of comparisons, I'm seeing a little bit of George Kittle and some Kyle Juszczyk. In some aspects, he's like both, as he's not flashy, and none of his attributes really jump off the page that much, but he pretty much has everything going for him. To many, he could be this year's Sam Laporta, as he'll catch the ball, he knows how to block, is athletic enough, will fit the system, and is going to get the job done. He also has a chip on his shoulder, and Ben Sinnott, in my opinion, while somewhat crazy and maybe a reach, I think will be good in the NFL and will have a long career. I still remember watching him in that Mizzou game, and he looks even better in person than he does on film. But who knows, maybe he'll be a bust. We'll just have to wait and see, and if you're a Kansas State or a Commanders fan, what do you think of Ben Sinnott? What do you think of his story, and how do you think he'll end up doing in the NFL? Also, be sure to let me know another prospect I should cover in my next video, and before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.